Hi. So who knows what's going on in this picture? Yeah, a few of us. That's the Stanford marshmallow experiments from the 60s, which you may remember was where some researchers got a group of kids into a room by themselves, one by one, so one at a time. And they said, okay, so here's a marshmallow on a plate. It's delicious. I'm going to go and leave the room for 15 or 20 minutes. And when I come back, if that marshmallow is still on the plate, I'll give you another one. And if it's not there, you don't get another one. And then they left the room and videoed, whether the kids could manage it or not. And there was a group of kids who were able to resist the temptation and not have the marshmallow. And then there were other kids like this guy who gave into temptation and ate the marshmallow. And this was an interesting longitudinal study that they then entered into. They followed the lives of these kids over the next couple of decades to see what became of them. And those who had exhibited this ability to postpone gratification early on just did better in life. Their BMIs were lower as adults. They got better grades. Their wages were higher. So they did better in life. I thought that was quite interesting. So why am I talking about this now? Well, I think actually this exemplifies who we are as Brits. Really, we're really not very good as a nation at managing our money. So we've heard a few figures during the day which have been pretty damning of our ability to look after our money. But we hear things like, if you look at the league tables, how much we save compared to the rest of the world. The global average is about 24%. We're right down towards the bottom of the league table. And when I first started using this metric 18 months ago, we saved 12%, so half the global average down there with Angola and countries like that. And now it's gone down to, according to the World Bank, 11% just in 18 months. So not just poor, but getting worse. You get countries like Singapore and China who are saving 49 to 50%. In terms of looking after ourselves for retirement, we end up with hardly any money saved up by the time we come to retirement. We just don't think about it. And there's 60 million people with under £100 in saving. So if you marry this with the fact that actually it's quite a complex environment to navigate, and there's nobody, as Andrew discussed this morning, to help us with that. Most people don't have access to advice on what kind of things were available, what products to get, how to invest in them, how to set yourself up for success, how to navigate the tax landscape. Who can help us with that? That help is out of reach for most people. So at Wealth Wizards, it's our mission to help people to get control of their finances. And we think that technology is going to play a big role in this. And so what we've been doing since 2009 is working on a smart platform, which is a platform that can give advice that humans would give, but in an automated way. As we've heard, we started off early on with pensions and at-retirement advice, but we've been building this platform in such a way that it can give advice in all of these different markets. And we hope, over the next year or so to be in all of these markets. So with the smart platform that we're giving is a machine. It's a robo-advisor that can give advice to people about particular things. And it's got these two channels on it, the digital direct, which is where we started, and this other thing which we kind of started as a trial, maybe was it 18 months or 2 years ago, that has been super successful. So the digital direct journey is where, so for example, our pension wizard, if people want to figure out how much money am I going to need in retirement, based on how much money I earn at the moment and what my circumstances like and who I am as a person, you can go through all of that on your phone in, I suppose, about 7 minutes without interacting with any human. And the advice that you get at the end is kind of, regulated financial advice that is signed off by our IFA. We've got our own IFA. So that's one type of advice. Then when we try to get into more complex areas of advice, like at retirement advice, which is really complex in comparison. So you're at retirement, now how do you draw down on all of that money? How do you make this money last for the rest of your life? What we found was we were able to build a system that could give advice in a fully digital way, but we noticed that the market is not yet ready to have advice of that complexity delivered in that way, in a fully digital way. At least at the time that we were doing it, it wasn't. So we started trying something else out, this hybrid model, where how about we have a human and machine working together to give you advice? And that's the thing that David was talking about early on, actually works really well. So we're looking at, we are now giving all of the advice in our smart platform over these two channels. Some more about that in a minute. Now, this is an AI conference, so let's just quickly talk about how we got into AI. So here's a quick video of the kinds of stuff that we did in our lab over the years. So we started about 18 months ago. Just a few of us playing around in our lab, our bedrooms essentially, and we did things like we built this self-driving car out of so that's Jonathan. We pinched his son's Lego and built a self-driving car out of it. We built chatbots. I built this AI to solve Sudoku puzzles, which is now able to solve Sudoku puzzles much better than I can. We built Alexa skills. So we could do things like that, like to link in with our Monzo account, so how much money is in our account. To do things like raise service desk tickets, to book meeting rooms. That's stuff that we use internally. We did a lot of work on neural networks and computer vision and that kind of thing. And it slowly started to dawn on us that, hey, there's an application here for what we do at Wealth Wizards. This can be, we're starting to be able to see how we can use this to give financial advice. At one point, this was probably about 14, 15 months ago, we built a neural network which could, based on a set of data, figure out whether you should annuitize or not. And if you should go for a drawdown pension, how much, what fund specifically you should go for. So it's around this time that we started to realize there's legs in this. Let's go and get some funding and hire some people who know what they're doing. And that's been part of the magic, really, that we've hired people who are from a data science background and paired them with people in the organization who are learning data science and learning about AI, learning machine learning, but they really, really understand the domain that we're working in. And this kind of mix of we've got about 13 people at the moment working in this guild. We call that an AI guild. That's where the magic happens. And quite quickly we started to have big breakthroughs. So you had data scientists who knew machine learning really well, but didn't really understand the domain. We had people who understood the domain really well, who are mathematicians who could start to understand AI, and that gelled really well together. So once we got to that point, we stumbled upon this thing that Daniel described earlier, the AI fallacy, and we realized that, wow, the stuff that we've been building so far has, we've been kind of falling into this trap, which is, obviously a very common trap to fall into. And the AI fallacy, just to recap from earlier, is this idea that if you want to try and replicate the behavior or the outcomes that a human is getting, then you need to follow the same methodology. And you might remember that Daniel was talking about Kasparov, and where it would be a mistake to try and mimic the kind of intuition that he brings to his game. We realized that we were trying to do the same thing when we were building robo-advisors. So an example of that is if you sit an advisor down and ask him, how do you do what you do? How do you give advice and try to build an expert system out of that? Then you will end up with this big branching structure where, okay, so how old are you? Are you above or below retirement age? That's branch number one. How much do you earn? Is it in this bucket, or this bucket? That's branch number two. And the more questions you ask, the more branches, the more possible branches you can go down. This is how most robo-advisors, I think, are built nowadays, and this is how we built our early ones. And the idea is that what we found is that that's actually very, very difficult to build, and it's really difficult to test. And once we built our first one, and then we wanted to try and customize that for a second tenant in a white label environment, we would then have to spend several months with advisors from other organizations to figure out, how do you give advice in your organization? How does it differ from this? Which of these nodes in here is different, and how would you tweak it? And just the analysis would take months, and then the build would take months, and then the testing would take months. And the knock-on effect of that is whenever we wanted to change something, we'd have to go through that same analysis, build, test cycle. So that was really hard. And it's interesting, actually, if you look at out-retirement advice, when there's maybe 250 factors that you need to take into account, how many nodes does that make? Well, if you think that it's B to the D, so B is, what is the branching? So let's say at each branch you've got 2 possible outcomes, and then D, which is the depth of this tree. So that's 2 to the 250, which is about the number of atoms that there are in the observable universe. So that's why it's just crazy complex, and that's why it was a very, very difficult space to work in. So after studying AI for a while, we realized there are simpler ways of doing it. Let's look for them. And quite quickly we arrived at this idea of using AI to do it, which we released in February under this brand of Churo. So the first thing that Churo is able to do, Churo is the AI or the smart inside our financial robo-advisor. What this is able to do is to learn how an organization gives advice by reading through their advice cases. So if you were to sit down with an advisor and say, so tell me, under this particular circumstance, what would you do? And what if the guy owns a surfboard? And then what if he's got like a heart murmur? And to try and explore all of these different things, that's hard. But if we say instead, well, give us a few of your cases, and we'll get our machine learning algorithms to read through them to see what it is that you're doing. Then it's easier for us to spot what it is that they're doing. And so we were able to build a system that could give advice. We started off in the DB space, and then we realized that we can quite quickly train that to give different house views for different organizations. We then realized, oh, hang on, this is very generalizable. So we tested that with the different markets that we wanted to get into and realized this applies across the board. And that's where we came up with this idea of a generalized solution mapper. So what Churo is able to do is to take an organization's cases and learn how they apply their philosophy, what their philosophy is really. So if you take 2 different advice houses, the way that they give advice might be different. So, advice company A might be really focused on high net worth individuals, for example. And so their advice might be different to advice company number B, letter B. So this is, Churo is able to figure that out. And the way that it does that is by reading through a set of cases. And so what we ask for is a set of cases that looks like this, anonymized, of course, where we take all of the data that has been gathered during a fact find about a person and the decision that was given. Again, this is from the defined benefit pension space, and in this case, the outcome is quite simple: transfer or don't transfer. And to see under what circumstances an organisation says, okay, this guy Alan should transfer, but this other person Lynn shouldn't transfer. So we run that through a machine learning model. And that then develops a model which can replicate that same house view. And what we've got here put side by side is the advice from 2 different organizations where we fed in the same data about the same customer. So we've taken Alan, let's say, taken his fact find and given it to company A and said, do you think this guy should transfer out of his defined benefit pension or not? And the answers come back, yes, he should transfer. And then and crucially, for these reasons, so this is one of the big things that this is one of the big challenges that we had to solve if we wanted to use AI in the highly regulated environment that we work in. We had to make sure that it would be explainable. You can't just say, well, the computer said you should transfer, so we said you should transfer. We can't. That doesn't wash in court. So what we had to do was to come up with a way that we could do this that people who are not techies could understand. And that's why the neural network things that we tried, when we tried applying simple deep learning to the problem early on about 18 months ago, that didn't work. Because what a neural network will give you is when you say, why did you give that result, is it will give you something like a big spreadsheet full of zeros and ones and say, I don't know, but here's a big bunch of zeros and ones. Does that make any sense to you? So that's obviously not good enough. What we've done is come up with this list of factors. Now I've anonymized the list of factors because they're kind of our secret IP. But there'll be things that you might recognize if you're an advisor, like critical yield value, attitude to risk, hurdle rate, those kinds of things. And what we can see that is in this case, we recommended that Alan should transfer because there were these two factors that were strongly weighted towards that. So that might be something to do with the critical yield value, for example. This second company over here also recommends that Alan should transfer out of his defined benefit scheme, but for different reasons. And one thing that we noticed once we started doing this for two companies is we realized, wow, some companies weight psychological factors more heavily, and other companies weigh economic factors more heavily. And in both cases, those pieces of advice are suitable. They're what the FCA would deem as suitable advice, but they're different. And that's okay. So that's the first thing that we do. That's the advisor journey. I'm also going to talk about the consumer journey and the regulator journey. But the advisor journey is really all about how we've discovered that AI can help us to make human advisors a lot more effective at what they're doing. So we heard this morning that the figures that in some cases it can take several hours spread over weeks or maybe months to go from speaking to a customer on the phone and gathering facts to actually delivering them some advice. This can bring that. Our customers tell us that can multiply, that can speed that up by a factor of 8 to 10. Now you can imagine if we're doing that, then we're effectively, if we put this into the hands of all of the advisors in the UK, making it so that there are no longer only 22,000 advisors in the UK. There's more like effectively 220,000. So that's the efficiency thing. The second thing is the consumer journey. Now, I think it's really. Oh, have I gone off? No. I think it's really important to talk about this because a lot of industries, when you hear them talking about AI, they're talking about making the company cheaper to run, and they're not thinking about, well, how does this affect the consumer? And to be honest, that is where we've started. But we realised that when we were getting up on stage at Finovate and talking about here's the magical AI thing that we've invented, it doesn't actually look very sexy. I'm sure you'll agree. All the sexy stuff happens below the surface, and for the consumer, they can't even tell that we're using AI. I mean, maybe they can tell because they're getting the advice really quickly, and maybe they can tell because the advice is now cheaper, but they can't tell that it's cheaper. So robo-advice is still largely you fill in a form, clever stuff happens over here that you can't see, and then you get back a PDF. And we think we can do better than that. So the advisor journey is what we've done. What we're doing at the moment, what we hope to release this year, is stuff to do with the consumer journey. And so chatbots are the obvious place to start. We've got this bot called Lydia in the lab where you can say, you can ask her questions about pensions. So what is an annuity? What is a pension? Are you a bot? Yes. Would you like? So we built in small talk and stuff. So we did this quite early on, and that's obviously quite basic. We've realised that this has got really good applications actually inside the organisation. So we've got something inside Wealth Wizards Engineering called Field Marshal. Field Marshal Field Marshal works in platform. So there's only one person in the whole organization who can make changes to our production systems, and that person's a bot. And that's really good for lots of reasons, because if you want to make a change, well, as in a regulated environment, we want there to be a record of every single change that's been made. When was the change made? What was it before? What was it afterwards? Who authorized the change? Who asked for the change? When did all of this happen? Did we roll back? All of that's captured. So we can see here that Harpreet, who's one of our QAs, one of our testers, he wanted to deploy something into live, so he asked on this system, which is a bit like Skype, we call it HipChat. He asked in this chat room, "Hey, Field Marshal, can you deploy this application here called Money Wizard to Wealth Wizards Red, which is our production environment? And here's a link to the ticket that authorizes that change." So there's like a long history. Audit trail of everything that's been done, and then Field Marshal replies So the reason I'm talking about this is because I think chatbots really do have a place in the organization, but for me, I feel that they're kind of a stepping stone on the way to the main event, which is speech. And I think only a quarter of us put our hands up earlier when Andrew said, did anyone see the Google I/O thing yesterday? So maybe we should have a quick look at that now.
On Tuesday between 10 and noon. What happens is the Google Assistant makes the call seamlessly in the background for you. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Mm-hmm. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have at 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Amazing. So the reason I wanted to look at that is because I think speech is really where the main event is. What we want is an advisor that you can speak to at any time of the day. It's the best advisor in the UK, and they're on the end of the phone so that you can ring them up and speak to them at any time. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that in the next couple of years. So speech is not there yet, which I think is why we're really excited about chatbots. But as we can see, it is getting there. So we're preparing for when it has arrived. And what we're doing is building a system called, which is part of Churo, which we're kind of calling Lydia. And the idea is that we've taken the speech to text capability of Google, so we use their APIs to listen to what is happening when an advisor talks to a client, and to translate that into text, and that is getting really good now. And then we've taken other research that's been going on publicly to in places like Stanford to extract from that the nouns and the verbs and the subjects and the verbs and the objects, so that we can see relationships between things. And then we've applied our own research, so our own original research, to apply a financial services lens to that, so that let's quickly watch another video. When we think about what are we going to use that for? So when we think about what advice is like, if you pay for a premium service now, and you go and meet with an advisor and sit down, maybe around a table with a cup of tea and perhaps a big sheet of A3, and you sketch out, right, what's my life going to be like when I'm 67 or when I'm 65? Am I going to have a caravan? Am I going to be going to the Caribbean? What is it that I'm going to be doing? And you get opportunity to speak in natural language with a human being, face-to-face contact, to speak about your dreams and to speak about what worries you, and to talk about like who you are as a person. So how are you with risk? And how would you be if you lost some of your money when the stock market crashed? You have these kinds of conversations, and it's all very warm and lovely. And then the advisor helps you to plot a course from where you are at the moment to how to get to there in your life. So computers have come along and helped us to make that better, in that they can make advisors more effective at what they're doing. So to make them work faster, they can deliver advice for cheaper. But does that make it better for the consumer? If you put a computer in the way at the moment, it is literally in the way, isn't it? So that, look how high that guy's screens are. So Michael's an advisor. He's talking to somebody over the phone. But whether he's talking to them over the phone or whether he's talking face-to-face to them, he's still behind a screen, isn't he? So the computer's asking, what is your name? And the computer's asking, how old are you? And that kind of thing. And it's that we've lost all of the magic of the human to human contact. So what we're looking at developing at the moment, we've made some big breakthroughs in the lab actually with this. Is what if artificial intelligence could listen into the conversation? Everybody knows about it; it's all above board. But the computer is there, present in the conversation, listening to the conversation, and helping the advisor in the background. So here's a graph of facts. So that's Michael talking to Joyce. Here's a graph of facts that the AI has picked up about Joyce. So what we were able to demonstrate recently is not only is it able to pick up if she says, I've got a pension with Aegon, I think it's a defined contributions pension. Not only is it able to transliterate that and to write that down in text, but it's able to also to understand, well, hey, a DC pension, that's a type of pension. And a pension is a type of investment, and it's an investment that Joyce has. So you've got these, it's filling in the fact find, but also representing it as a graph of facts. And that's really useful for two reasons. One is the computer's over there, so the advisor doesn't need to use the keyboard. But it's also serves as an aid memoir, so that the advisor can kind of casually glance over to the screen every now and again and say, okay, yeah, we haven't spoken about assets yet, or we haven't spoken about debt yet. When I'm ready, and when the conversation naturally lends itself to that, I'll guide the conversation over there, and we can talk about that. So I think this is a stepping stone to us then using this in a completely hands-off way. This is a training ground for us doing this without the advisor. Every time we do this hybrid thing, we make human advisors better at what they do, and we make their job, I think, more enjoyable. But we're also training the AI to be able to do that in an automated way. So we recently ran a demo where we had a fact find of 10 questions, and we had a completely free-form natural conversation between two people in show and tell in front of the whole company. And the AI could tell, hang on, at the moment we're talking about investments, so let me listen out for investment-related stuff. Oh no, hang on, it sounds like we're not talking about that anymore. What are we talking about now? Oh, we're talking about mortgages. Okay, let's go and talk about mortgages. And so then when people were answering questions, it was able to put them in the right part of the fact find. And that's a massive breakthrough, actually, for us. So we think that this second type of technology where is going to allow voice to become the standard way that people interact with their advisors. So then we've got the regulator journey. What's really interesting about this in the environment we work in is that we always have to be able to prove that the advice that we gave to somebody was correct and it was good and it delivered good customer outcomes. And there's obviously a whole industry inside each organization making sure that our advice is compliant. And what this thing here represents is the whole space of advice that you could give. All right, this is only in 2 dimensions. Let's imagine if there are 250 questions in a fact find, there's actually 250 dimensions, but I'm not very good at picturing things in 250 dimensions. But imagine this is something like your attitude to risk on this scale and the amount of risk that we recommended that you get into. And then on other dimensions, on the 3rd dimension, there might be things like your capacity for loss or what the transfer value is of your pension and that kind of thing. What we're able to do on this is when the AI reads through all of your advice cases, is to plot the advice that you've given on an advice space like that, on a graph, so that we can see, wow, there's this cluster, and you do actually see this. There's a cluster of advice that we give. People like this, we tend to advise in this way. People like this, we tend to advise in this way. So this is what your advice looks like. What that means is, if somebody then gives a piece of advice that's way over here, wow, that looks different to the rest of the advice that we've given already. Normally, people of this type, our company normally advises in this way, but you've just given a piece of advice which is over here. Are you okay with that? So we see this as being part of a dashboard that advisors can use. So advisors will, as they're giving advice, have each piece of advice that they're giving checked by an automated compliance officer who works for them, who's kind of helping them to see, is the advice that I'm giving suitable? Is it according to what our company's philosophy is and our company's house style? And is it anomalous in any way? So when people are giving advice to a new type of a client, it might be that the advice that you're giving is anomalous, but you might be okay with that. But isn't it better to understand that up front before the advice leaves the building? So what we've been able to do with Churo, and we're working actively with partners on this at the moment, is to build something which can be used by compliance organizations to read through an organization's case history to see what does your advice look like, and are there any pieces of advice which are anomalous. So we think this works for three organizations, for three people in the organization: the advisor, the compliance officers, and then external compliance organizations as well. So just briefly then, I wanted to quickly talk about where we think this is going. So we've looked at what we've done so far with Churo. What we're doing at the moment is with building the speech and the chatbot integrations with our products. Where do we think this is going to go longer term? Daniel alluded to it earlier, but effective computing, which has now become like my favorite field of AI. This is where AIs are able to detect what emotion you're currently undergoing, and also to influence that. And it's a really interesting story. If you want to look it up, it's a field that was stumbled upon by Rosalind Picard, who was a researcher at MIT, and she was a professor actually in the 90s in computer vision, and she was approaching tenure, and she realized that we can't go very far in any direction with computer vision without talking about emotion. And being a scientist, she was uncomfortable with speaking with her colleagues, also scientists, about emotion. And so she had to think, do I go for tenure and just carry on being a standard computer vision expert, or do I step over into this whole other environment which nobody in the world is doing at the moment, and see whether emotion actually can be detected by computers, to see whether emotion is relevant in any way. And I'm glad to say that she took the second option, and she stepped over into Macedonia and said, actually, all of these grants that I've just got, I want to spend them on emotion. She also had to wrestle with the fact that she was a woman in a man's world, and she had to decide, am I going to be known as being the woman who was always going on about emotion? And actually, she did get a lot of flack from a lot of scientists for a long time, senior professionals. But fortunately, fast forward 20 years, and this is a huge field now, and it's it's a very well established field. And the most expensive book I've ever bought is the Oxford companion to effective computing, a massive big tome like this, which is one of the most interesting things I've ever read. So once Oxford University's psychology department has got a book on your thing, it's pretty much an established field, I would have thought. So what have they been able to do? What they're able to do at its most basic level is to plot where points are on your face. So your face has got fixed points, like the tip of your nose, and where your cheekbones are, and the top of your where these bones are in your eyes. And then it's got movable parts like the corners of your mouth and your eyelids, and etc. And what it's able to do is figure out, based on the geometry of where those things are in relation to each other and how quickly they're moving, and in which directions, it's able to tell what you're experiencing at the moment. And where Rosalind Picard started back in the 90s was with the 5 basic emotions, which are things like happiness and sadness and disgust and fear. But what we're able to do at the moment is actually a lot more sophisticated. And this has massive ramifications in education, because if you can detect confusion, and you can detect frustration, and you can detect curiosity, then wow, all of a sudden then you can build systems that can start to optimize your learning environment, so that it's able to find that for your learning, it's able to find the right level of challenge for you. So we can see, all right, so you are engaged in what I'm saying at the moment. So maybe I can push a bit more and give information more quickly and try concepts which are more difficult. Does that work? Okay, now I've found the limit. Okay, let me step back a little bit. And I think this has got big ramifications for how we give advice. Because what Daniel was saying earlier is that professions in general are no longer going to be just the custodians of information, and nobody can touch this because this is my thing. people are going to have access to information, and so people are going to technology is going to help people become more empowered. So if we want people to get a control of their finances, then it's important that they learn some of the fundamentals of how to go about that. And maybe it's great if they continue to learn over time. Okay, so now I've grasped what ISAs are. Let me now start to learn what is the next thing I can do. Is there anywhere else that I can invest my money? Okay, well, if a computer can tell what you're interested in and give that to you at the right time, then we've got a great vehicle for helping people to take control again. So effective computing, it's my favorite new field. Generative models. Who's seen the generative model video of Barack Obama? It was recently at the TED Talk, wasn't it? It's again. I think this is Google and a university, perhaps the University of Washington. I think this was about a year ago. They wrote a paper on this, and in the TED Talk there was 4 videos of Barack Obama playing, and you could hear him talking, and they were all taken from different shots, and they were all emoting in a slightly different way. And the question that the researcher gave was, which one of these is the real Barack Obama? And actually none of them were, and they all looked exactly like Barack Obama. It's a great video if you want to look it up. It's on Google. Obviously that's got pros and cons to it, that approach. And so the same researchers who are doing that research are also producing tools to help people to tell when you're doing that. So they've built a browser plugin that will say, oh, hang on, there's something on this page that you're looking at which has been generated by an AI. So, I admit that this is not without its creepy side. But the ability to feed in an audio feed and then to generate a face of somebody that you like and that you trust, well, that seems quite interesting to me. We could choose our own advisors. One idea that we've played with a little bit is, how about if your advisor was an older version of you? We can see apps now that can take you and age you a little bit. Oh, young man, if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have done that when I was 20. I wish I'd saved 20% more into my pension, that kind of thing. So you could choose who it was going to be. But if we marry this with augmented reality, which only 2 years ago seemed like a crazy brand new thing, and now it's commonplace. Kids are using it in the street. Google released this thing as well, where you can walk around New York and it will show you which direction to turn in next. Imagine if you were to put on whatever next year's version of Google Glass is going to be and look at your living room and see, oh wow, this is what my living room is going to look like in 30 years if I don't get my act together. Computer, what can I do to get my act together? Well, Pete, you should save a little bit more money into your pension. So that's kind of like a ghost of Christmas future kind of thing, and that's not too far off, is it? So your glasses presenting the world as it would be in the future, looking at your living room. So that's the 3 to 5 year horizon. I think it's really important to recognise that the technology is broad and it's powerful and it's far-reaching. And so I think it would be a real shame if all we focused on was making our companies cheaper to run. I think I've got to admit I'm having great fun playing around with all this technology, but that's not really what it's about. If we come back to the mission that we spoke about at the beginning, Brits are rubbish at looking after their money. We stand a real chance of helping them to get that right, and technology is going to be a big part of helping us to do that. Thanks.